We'll talk about the death of Jeffrey Epstein. I think it's one of these scandals that highlights the concerns Americans have about the rule of law here in the United States, about the Justice Department, about equal treatment under the law, about the idea of a two-tier justice system, and whether or not the government can be trusted to investigate itself. Now, Jeffrey Epstein, several years ago, was convicted in, I think, state court in Florida of sex crimes. As part of that plea deal he agreed to, Florida, at least the U.S. attorney in Florida, Mr. Acosta, who used to be Labor Secretary under President Trump, agreed he wouldn't be subject to any federal crimes stemming from those crimes. So basically everything was supposed to be clear. Now, a lot of people have looked at that plea deal and thought it was too light and that it was a slap on the wrist, and I'm not in a position to argue that, but it was a plea deal, and he spent time in jail under very lax conditions, but he was convicted. He had an agreement, the feds blessed it, and then more information about his victims has come out because they've gotten older and braver, because they are older and have discussed the allegations in more detail. The Justice Department's been embarrassed by the way it handled it. And now Jeffrey Epstein, of course, has been tied to a whole host of political figures tangentially to President Trump, really nothing there, but more closely to Bill Clinton. He is a funder and founder, according to Epstein's own people, of the Clinton Global Initiative, which is the Clinton Foundation. Clinton's been on his planes 24 times, and of course, given Bill Clinton's proclivities, there's a sense that he may have been up to no good with him, given Epstein's proclivities. Long story short, the Southern District of New York indicted him on crimes from the same time period that the Florida representatives of the Justice Department had essentially given him a pass on. So the question is whether the indictment was political or proper. Now, the Justice Department says just because one district in Florida agreed to it, it didn't mean that the Southern District of New York was bound by it. I think that's a debatable point. I think in the end, though, that the decision to prosecute him was because of the, however tangential relationship to Trump, a desire to embarrass Trump. Remember, this is the same district that raided Trump's lawyers' offices, and I just don't buy that after years and years and years, the Justice Department would all of a sudden find God and decide to rectify the wrong against his victims by re-prosecuting Mr. Epstein. I just don't believe that was done out of the goodness of their hearts. I think it was an institutional decision designed to protect the institution, hopefully smear Trump in the process. And so that being said, let's say that it was a proper indictment. This doesn't mean I think Epstein's a great guy, but I'm suspicious when the Justice Department moves in these areas because of the political nature of the Justice Department decision-making and prosecutions. Now, if it were up to me, I would have prosecuted him in a severe way back when these crimes were first highlighted. But they didn't do that. But they signed on to an agreement that probably is still enforceable. So that's my concern from a rule of law perspective. That all being said, let's give the government the benefit of the doubt. They were aware of crimes, there were new crimes, and they prosecuted him. Their job, given his connections, Epstein, a supposed wealthy guy, connected to all sorts of political people, mostly Democrats, who may or may not have been involved in his sex trafficking operations or participated in them. He asked for bail. He was denied bail over the, thanks in part, obviously the Justice Department objected to giving him bail. The Southern District of New York objected to giving him bail. And now he's dead under mysterious circumstances. A few weeks ago, he's found in his cell or outside his cell on the ground, and it's still not clear what happened to him. It suggested he tried to commit suicide, or he was otherwise injured or assaulted. We still don't know. Nevertheless, he was put on suicide watch only for a few days, and then he was taken off suicide watch at the request of his lawyers. Which doesn't mean it should have been done or that it was well-founded. He had had another inmate in the jail with him in the federal facility in Manhattan. But then that person was removed and he's in the cell alone. And he's supposed to be watched, or at least looked after every 30 minutes or so. And based on the reports, that was not done. For several hours, he was not monitored. As others have said, given the fact that he was one of the most notorious prisoners in the United States prison system, probably the most famous person they had, he should have been watched 24/7. So you got all of these whether he committed suicide or not is an open. Now he's dead. Now I don't know how he died. We don't know how he died. It's been a week almost. We still don't know how he died. The New York Post reported he was found in a way that suggested he had hung himself on his bunk. Some people have said that is bunk. They've been able who have done that. The Washington Post reports that the autopsy initially has found that certain bones were broken in his neck, which though not all the time an indicia of homicide, are often an indicia of homicide, meaning someone has strangled you and broken the bones in your neck. Now that can also happen in 16% of the cases if you somehow hang yourself. But certainly it raises additional questions about the nature of Epstein's death. And I don't care if it was suicide or homicide. Something happened, in my view, in a corrupt way that resulted in his death. And the Justice Department is responsible. He was in their custody. Bureau of Prisons is run by the Justice Department. So the Southern District of New York engages in this controversial prosecution that may be a second bite of the apple, deny this guy bail, and maybe rightly so, and he ends up dead. Inexcusable. And we're now expected to take at face value the investigations that the Justice Department is going to conduct here. Attorney General Barr, by all accounts, is upset. He should be upset. He should be asked tough questions about this too. Anyone who knows anything about the Bureau of Prisons knows that it's poorly run. Whitey Bulger, the famous FBI corrupt, the mafia guy tied to FBI corruption up in Massachusetts, he was murdered in a federal facility not too long ago. Jeffrey Epstein, who knows if he was murdered or not. People's immediate assumption is that it's part of the Clinton body count. The crazy leftists are saying that Trump had Russia do it, which is absurd. Given Epstein's criminal activities, who knows who would want to see him dead? It could be, Prince Andrew's been implicated in his sexual activities with young women. Now, I'm not saying Prince Andrew is implicated in this. I'm just saying there's all sorts of people, given the nature of Epstein's activities, that people start throwing questions out about because the Justice Department can't be trusted to tie its own shoes. And one of the reasons it's not trusted is because of its record of corruption, its record of looking out the other way when there's a political figure that is favored or disfavored, political decision-making in terms of prosecutions improperly made. So the Justice Department protects Hillary Clinton, targets President Trump, and then a controversial prosecution, the subject of which has been tied to the Clintons, ends up dead. And we're all supposed to be surprised when Americans say, what's up with that? So we don't trust the Justice Department to investigate itself. It doesn't mean we won't take into account the facts that it lays out. The IG supposedly is investigating it. But I can tell you this, the fact we still don't know suggests that misconduct is still continuing at the Justice Department and the FBI and the Southern District of New York and the Bureau of Prisons. That's why as soon as we could, on Monday, we began a Freedom of Information Act investigation of the Epstein death. Who can you trust? You can trust Judicial Watch. You may not trust the Justice Department, you may not trust the FBI, but you can trust Judicial Watch to ask these questions. Because the court process that we operate under, assuming they don't give us the documents, is the best way currently available under law to get the truth out about what the government's up to. Better than an IG investigation, better than Congress, better than anything out there. I don't know if Epstein died or not, or was murdered or not. There are questions about the circumstances of his death that we deserve the answers to. And frankly, the whole handling of the Epstein matter needs to be under investigation because it's all part of the piece. He's dead because someone made a decision to prosecute him and keep him in a federal facility. Was that decision done under the rule of law or for political purposes? I don't know. But we're going to ask those questions. So what a terrible scandal. What and what's interesting is, because you look at the various conspiracy theories, and everyone says, well, you shouldn't be following conspiracy theories. Well, first of all, the jails are full of people put in there on conspiracy theories. Conspiracy is a crime. So a theory about a conspiracy that led to the death of an inmate like Jeffrey Epstein, people can fairly ask questions. The left doesn't want you to ask questions, by the way, unless they're questions they want you to ask. Any other questions, they don't want you to ask. And if you do, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, I reject that. I tend to take a simple approach that the most likely answer is probably the answer. But on the other hand, I believe everything until we get all the facts in. For instance, you look at the Jeffrey Epstein affair and you might think, well, it looks like he committed suicide. And then boom, autopsy report that is delayed suggests that he was murdered. So by suggesting he's murdered, is the autopsy, is the medical examiner a conspiracy theorist? Of course not. So Judicial Watch is doing, once again, stepping into the gap to investigate the Epstein death. We've got the Freedom of Information Act requests obviously out there. We're doing journalism on it as well. Real journalism, not the gossip journalism that passes for much of the media reporting these days. So we're doing investigative journalism, our traditional investigative activities, and obviously the Freedom of Information Act. I don't know what we'll find, and we may find it a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now. But you can trust Judicial Watch that we're not going to go away till we get the answers we're entitled to under the law.